today, as we mentioned before, is October 7th. That means it is the anniversary of the October 7th Hamas attacks. Let's go ahead and put this up on the screen. Our producer Griffin compiled some of the most striking and shocking images from that day. You can see rockets being fired. This is from Gaza City. You can see these images. And, I don't know if you guys remember where you were or how you felt learning this news, but I just remember being absolutely shocked. Here you can see one of probably the most notable images, which is Palestinians using a bulldozer to take down part of the barbed wire fence, razor wire fence surrounding Gaza. The way that this attack unfurled, they were able to use commercial drone technology to take out some of the surveillance systems and the there's automatic weapons trained in facing in at Gaza. They were able to take that out. Then they were able to infiltrate Israel, taking over 200 hostages. You can see this elderly woman who was taken hostage, and they're driving her back to Gaza. You can also see very quickly the beginning of the response from Israel. This is, they blew up multiple apartment towers here in Gaza City. And it's also kind of heart-wrenching to see this is also Gaza City. The, most structures there still intact. Of course, now here we stand a year later, and, all you would see in Gaza is scenes of just total and complete annihilation. So Hamas succeeds in this attack, I think, beyond their wildest expectations. At the end of the day, we can put this up on the screen. You have some 1,200 individuals who were killed, 695 Israeli civilians, 373 who were IDF, and 71 foreigners. Now, we've since learned that some number of those, we have no idea how many. All indications are that an overwhelming majority were killed by Hamas and affiliated groups, but some number of them were also killed by the IDF, instituting the so-called Hannibal Directive. And it appears that Hamas succeeded beyond their wildest expectations because of massive Israeli security failures leading up to that day. For one thing, you had a number of IDF troops who were repositioned to the West Bank to protect effectively rampaging settlers there. That was part of the project of, Smotrich and Ben-Gvir and these Netanyahu coalitional partners. You had a group of women IDF soldiers who were, doing the surveillance in Gaza. They were, spotting within Gaza and say, hey, they're planning for something big. And they were ignored and not listened to. There were the actual plans that the Israeli government were able to get their hands on in advance, that they also didn't believe because they didn't think that Hamas had that level of capability. And in terms of the world stage, at that point, Saagar, the Palestinian cause was basically forgotten. Trump had struck these Abraham Accords, where basically the deal was we're going to make these security deals with Gulf states to effectively forget about caring about Palestinians. And that was cited as part of the motivation for Hamas to engage in this, extraordinary attack on Israeli society that really shook that country to the core. Now, what we have seen since then has been just scenes of devastation and annihilation and terrifying escalation into a broadening war that even the greatest cynic, myself included, I don't think really could have imagined after October 7th. Anyone with a brain knew that the response was going to be brutal and barbaric because we've seen what Israel has done in the past when they've gone in these mow the lawn type operations. But we've never seen anything quite like this. Let's go ahead and put the next graphic we have. I believe it's D4, the number of Palestinians who were killed. To be honest with you, we really don't know. These are the official numbers. This is courtesy of Euromed Monitor. The official number is 50,292 killed in Gaza. A majority of them have been women and children. By the way, I want to say, there's this sort of shorthand of assuming that only the women and children are innocent. Of course, there are many innocent men who were also killed as part of this. But some experts, many experts, believe that the number is a lot higher than this. You have no ability of Western journalists, very little ability of aid workers to come in and operate and actually assess what the true death toll here is in the Gaza Strip. Let's put this next piece up on the screen. There's a group of doctors and healthcare workers that recently penned a letter about the horrors that they have seen unfolding there. And they write, this letter and the appendix show probative evidence that the human toll in Gaza since October is far higher than is understood in the U.S. It is likely that the death toll from this conflict is already greater than 118,000. That is an astonishing 5.4% of Gaza's population. They also write in this letter that there is effectively not a single person in Gaza who is not sick or injured in some way after a year of this just utter campaign of annihilation and this horrific onslaught. It's not that we haven't known what's going on either, not just because of the work of brave doctors such as these, but also because of the IDF soldiers themselves who have gone around on social media routinely bragging about the war crimes that they have committed in the Gaza Strip. Let's go ahead and play, guys, D3. Al Jazeera put together a documentary that was just about the IDF soldiers who, were posting through it and bragging here. They're bragging about the burning of a Palestinian neighborhood, saying this is what we will do. Not a memory will be left of them. We will annihilate them to dust. I'm sure you've seen some of these images before. This is a Palestinian who is blindfolded and being beaten and dragged. You can see these images of devastation. He says, look at, we're going to show you his back. He was tortured to make him speak. Lots of people say that the Israeli forces shouldn't be allowed to take phones into combat, but this expert says, listen, I'm actually glad they do, because at least it gives us some window into what's happening here. And Saagar, that's part of what has been uniquely horrifying, is it's all there for the world to see. And yet, our government has consistently turned a blind eye, gaslit us, tried to pretend like, oh no, we care about international law, we care about these humanitarian goals, we care about U.S. law. I mean, our government now, we've had plenty of evidence and reporting to convince everyone that our government is knowingly violating our own laws about continuing to ship weapons to Israel, given what they have done in the Gaza Strip, specifically the fact that we have State Department reports that prove that they were, in fact, inhibiting aid, keeping aid from getting to what is now a starving population. And so now we sit here a year later, and as I said, I don't think that the greatest cynic could have possibly imagined what would unfold in that time, and that it would still be ongoing now with no end in sight.
I think for Israel, it was just clear immediately afterwards when Biden gave that famous speech, and he's like, look, you have two choices. You can do what we did after 9/11, and you can escalate this and turn this into a generational style conflict, which could eventually subsume and destroy you in the long run, or you can deal with this in a more targeted manner. It was clear what they decided to do, both for political purposes, but also in terms of where we stand right now with the expansion of the war against Hezbollah, against Iran. But also, I think this has revealed a lot about the American political system. It's been very clarifying to me. Everyone talks about AIPAC. I think ADL may arguably be one of the organizations that I finally understood its purpose, and all that groundwork that they laid on censorship previously, working with the Facebook, Google, YouTube, and all of those others, so that they could kick into gear to serve their true master whenever October 7th happened, not only in the protest movement, but just generally. We've seen mass censorship happen all across the U.S., but most importantly, I've just seen the entire political system become completely obsessed with this foreign nation, which at the end of the day is not that important to the United States. Hundreds of billions of dollars likely lost now from the U.S. Our own soldiers, 3 of whom who died, don't forget that, on the Jordanian border with Syria. Also the 2 aircraft carriers, but the general political orientation around this conflict and the complete obsession. You probably saw that Lindsey Graham clip where he's like, I'm here in South Carolina about responding to this hurricane, but we can't forget about our friends in Israel. And it's like, that was so, I don't know, I always suspected it was there, but to see it like so openly and nakedly has been really disturbing for me.
To go back to some of what we've seen unfold over the course of the past year, I mean, if you remember, if you go back to the early phases of the war, they'd engage in these long, like the Israelis would engage in these long propaganda campaigns to justify like attacking a hospital, right? And it seems almost quaint at this point because now at this point, the entire medical infrastructure has been destroyed, not to mention schools, refugee camps, everything. Everything is basically destroyed. We can put D7 up on the screen showing the number of buildings that have been destroyed in the Gaza Strip. I mean, it's just, there's virtually nothing left. Two-thirds of all of the structures, mosques, churches, hospitals, schools, apartment buildings, private homes, two-thirds destroyed. 163,000 different buildings damaged or flattened. A third of those actually were high-rises. And we had reporting from Plus 972 magazine early on about how part of their impetus, part of the strategy here, was to intentionally target civilian infrastructure with the idea of if we cause enough pain to the civilian population, then maybe they'll rise up against Hamas. Obviously, there is no predicate in history of that actually happening. What happens instead is that they hate you more. And what happens instead is you create more people who want to kill you and who are terrorists and have a militant ideology. But that has not stopped the campaign of utter annihilation because Bibi Netanyahu and the rest of the Israeli government establishment, they needed to bring some win after this tremendous security failure. They needed to bring some win to the Israeli people. And the win is basically like blood and death and destruction. That's the win. That's why you see their soldiers bragging about it without impunity. I remember all the conversation about like, why don't they just take their phones? You know, why are they doing this? And it's because it's popular. These soldiers who post these things, they are celebrated at conferences throughout Israel. They are cheered. This is finding exactly the audience that they want. And the other goal is for Israel to, you know, in the very clinical terms, reestablish deterrence, meaning prove that they can be even more brutal and barbaric than anyone else in their quote-unquote neighborhood. And so, you know, that's what we've seen, just to give a sense of the grim death toll and horror unfolding there. Euromed Monitor put together this map of mass graves within the Gaza Strip. What you see is some selected number of unmarked mass graves that now exist in the Gaza Strip. There are over 120 newly established mass graves across the Gaza Strip. It's a landscape of death. That's what it is. And we've watched it on TikTok. We've seen it in our social media folds. We've seen it sometimes, occasionally, few images on television. You know, certainly if you watch you know, Al Jazeera or other non-Western media, you've seen these images. So no one can say they didn't know what was going on. No one can say that they weren't aware of the level of atrocities, and yet, you know, you continue to have the U.S. government pretending like they don't know and like, oh, this is just Israel defending themselves, which is utterly preposterous. Now the war has expanded. There have been threats from the beginning of effectively we're going to turn Lebanon into Gaza. And the Israelis now making good on that threat. You've had in just the past couple of weeks, 2,000 Lebanese killed. We don't know how many are Hezbollah, how many are civilians. We do know there are quite a large number of women and children also among these deaths. We also know that in just the strike that was used to take out, I shouldn't say strike, the strikes that were used to take out Nasrallah, who is the head of Hezbollah, they dropped more bunker buster bombs in that one strike than we used in the entirety of the Iraq invasion in that one strike. Over 80 2,000-pound bunker buster bombs to get one guy. So the bombing of Lebanon continues, the bombing of Gaza continues, and you know, in terms of there was a lot of conversation early on about the quote-unquote day after in Gaza. Could put D9 up on the screen. You know, they're finally becoming pretty clear about what the plan is here. This is Giora Island talking about how this new plan that is gaining a lot of traction within Israel of, hey, we're going to close off all of northern Gaza and we're going to say you have to leave. So once again, these people have been displaced before. Now, you know, let's displace you again. Let's ethnically cleanse this whole area. And if you don't go, we're just going to assume you are a quote unquote terrorist and we're going to murder you. And once this area has been cleansed, then we can come in and assert control. Of course, we know there have been conferences, attended by Likud party ministers and other government allies in which they're planning out specifically how they're going to resettle the entirety of the Gaza Strip. You have a huge invasion in the West Bank. You have even they're talking about, hey, let's establish a buffer zone. Let's go ahead and take some of Lebanon's territory while we're at it. And so again, the most cynical projections of genocide, ethnic cleansing, and all the rest, at this point in time, undeniable that whether that was the goal at the beginning or not among everyone, that is certainly where things are heading. And we also shouldn't lie that those plans have widespread acceptance and support within the state of Israel. And yes, there is protest within the state of Israel because the hostages at this point have been completely forgotten, completely erased from Bibi Netanyahu even pretending to care for them. But has there been outcries about the brutality with which Palestinian civilians have been treated, about this massive death toll, about the campaign of complete annihilation? Not much. Very little. Very, very little upset about that.
Especially compared to Ukraine, right? In terms of the way that initially the U.S. support for Ukraine and all that was sold to us. So I think that there's a lot to be said, and revealed about U.S. foreign policy and our own objectives, and also about the realignment of the world on the Ukraine and Israel front, and the way that our own words will be looked at in the future. But a lot of it really just comes back to this whole idea of like what American power is used for, what the American media is used for, what our own politics are captured by, and then very inconvenient facts and others that count against that are just dropped and that are not emphasized in favor of something is just a very clear agenda here in the US.
Hey, if you like that video, hit the like button or leave a comment below. It really helps get the show to more people.
And if you'd like to get the full show ad-free and in your inbox every morning, you can sign up at breakingpoints.com.
That's right. Get the full show, help support the future of independent media at breakingpoints.com.